You've probably heard the number. $37 trillion. That's how much debt the United States is carrying right now. It gets mentioned on the news, thrown around in political debates, and then everyone moves on like it doesn't really matter. But here's what nobody tells you. It's already in your wallet, right now, today. And in this video, we're going to show you exactly how. In plain English, no economics degree required. Let's start with the basics. What actually is the national debt? Think of it this way. Every year, the U.S. government spends money on roads, schools, the military, healthcare, Social Security. The list goes on. But every year, it spends more than it actually collects in taxes. That gap, the difference between what it spends and what it earns, gets borrowed. And that borrowed money adds up year after year after year. $37 trillion is what that pile of borrowed money looks like today. To put that in perspective, if you spent $1 every single second, it would take you over 1,000,000 years to spend $37 trillion. That's not a typo. 1,000,000 years. And here's something that will really put it in perspective. Right now, there are around 335 million people living in the United States. If you divided that $37 trillion equally between every single American, every man, woman, and child, each person's share would be over $110,000. A family of 4 would owe more than $440,000. That's before a mortgage, before a car loan, before a single credit card, just from existing as an American. Now let's talk about how this debt actually grew, because it didn't happen overnight. In 1980, the national debt was around $900 billion. By 1990, it had tripled to $3 trillion. By 2000, it hit $5.6 trillion. By 2010, after the financial crisis, it had more than doubled to $13 trillion. By 2020, so after COVID spending, it jumped to $27 trillion. And today it sits at $37 trillion and climbing. Every single president in modern history has added to it. Both parties, every decade, without exception. This isn't a political problem. It's a structural one. The government has been consistently spending more than it earns for over 40 years. And the bill is now large that interest payments are staggering. Now here's where it gets personal. Most people think national debt is a government problem, something politicians argue about in Washington that has nothing to do with their grocery bill or their mortgage payment, but that's not true. The national debt affects your life in 3 very direct ways, and we're going to walk through each one right now with real numbers and real examples. Number 1, inflation. When the government borrows more money than it can comfortably manage, one of the ways it copes is by printing more money. More money in the system chasing the same amount of goods means prices go up. That's inflation. And you've felt it. Let's put some real numbers on this. In 2020, the average American grocery bill for a family of 4 was around $400 a month. By 2024, that same basket of groceries cost closer to $520 a month. That's a $120 increase every single month just for food. Over a year, that's $1,440 out of your pocket. Not because you started buying more, but because everything costs more. Rent tells the same story. The average U.S. rent in 2020 was around $1,100 a month. By 2024, it had climbed to over $1,500 a month in most major cities. That's an extra $400 a month, $4,800 a year. Gone. Not because your apartment got bigger or better, just because of inflation, and inflation doesn't happen in a vacuum. When the government prints money to cover its spending, and it has been doing exactly that, more dollars chase the same goods and services. Your dollar buys less. Every dollar in your wallet is quietly worth a little less than it was last year. And the bigger the debt grows, the more pressure there is for that to continue. Number 2, interest rates. Here's something most people don't realize. The U.S. government has to pay interest on its debt, just like you pay interest on a credit card or a home loan. Right now, the government is paying around $1 trillion a year just in interest on that $37 trillion, not paying down the debt, not building roads or schools or hospitals, just the interest, $1 trillion a year. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire U.S. defense budget. The government is spending more on interest payments than it spends on its military. Now, why does that matter to you personally? Let's use a real example. In 2021, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate in the U.S. was around 3%. On a $400,000 home, that meant monthly repayments of around $1,686. By 2024, that same mortgage rate had climbed to around 7%. On the same $400,000 home, your monthly repayment is now $2,661. That's $975 more every single month, $11,700 more every single year, for the exact same house. Now, those rate rises happened for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest pressures on interest rates is government borrowing. When the government needs to borrow trillions of dollars, it competes in the same market as everyone else who needs to borrow money, including you. High demand for borrowing pushes rates up, and when rates go up, your mortgage costs more, your car loan costs more, your credit card debt costs more. The government's debt problem quietly becomes your debt problem, through the price you pay every single month. Number 3, your future taxes. This is the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to talk about. That $37 trillion has to be dealt with eventually. There is no magic button, no way to just make it disappear. And there are really only 2 ways a government raises money. It either cuts spending, which means fewer services, smaller safety nets, reduced benefits for the people who need them most, or it raises taxes. Let's be specific about what that could look like. Income taxes could rise, meaning more of your paycheck goes to Washington before you ever see it. Capital gains taxes could rise, meaning when your investments grow and you sell them, you keep less of the profit. Retirement account rules could change. The tax advantages on your 401k or IRA that you're counting on today may look different in 20 years. Social Security and Medicare, programs that millions of Americans depend on, face serious funding pressure as the debt grows and the interest payments consume more of the budget. None of this is certain. Nobody knows exactly when or how the reckoning comes. But what history tells us, from countries that have faced debt crises before, is this: the longer the debt grows, the harder the eventual adjustment becomes. And ordinary working people are almost always the ones who feel it most. So what do you actually do about this? Here's the good news. You can't control what Washington does with its credit card, but you can absolutely control what you do with yours. There are 3 things you can start doing right now to protect yourself, no matter what happens with the national debt. Protection, step 1. Invest, don't just save. Money sitting in a savings account earning 2% or 3% interest sounds safe. But if inflation is running at 4% or 5%, which it has been, your money is actually losing purchasing power every single year. You feel safe, but you're slowly falling behind. Let's put numbers on this. Say you have $10,000 in a savings account earning 2% interest. After 1 year, you have $10,200. But if inflation is at 4%, the things that cost $10,000 last year now cost $10,400. Your $10,200 can no longer buy what $10,000 bought 12 months ago. You saved, you earned interest, and you still lost ground. Money invested in assets that grow over time, index funds, property, businesses, has a real chance to outpace inflation over the long term. Saving is safe in the short term. Investing is how you stay ahead over the long term. Protection, thus, too. Understand your debt and lock in fixed rates where you can. In a high debt, high inflation environment, Variable interest rates are a risk. If you have a variable rate mortgage or loan, understand what happens to your repayments when rates rise. Run the numbers. If your rate went from 5% to 7% tomorrow, what would that do to your monthly payment? Could you still afford it? Fixed rates give you certainty. In uncertain economic times, certainty has real value. It's not always possible to switch, but it's always worth understanding what you're exposed to. Protection. Step 3. Build financial resilience before you need it. The people who come through economic uncertainty in the best shape aren't the ones who predicted what was coming. They're the ones who were already prepared before anything happened. What does that look like practically? An emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of living expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account, not tied up in investments you'd have to sell at a bad time. Manageable debt, keeping your total monthly debt repayments well below 30% of your take-home pay. And where possible, multiple income streams, a side income, a skill that earns, investments that generate passive returns. Not because anything is definitely coming, but because resilience means you don't have to panic when it does. $37 trillion is an almost incomprehensible number, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming, because at the end of the day, the only debt you can actually control is your own. And the best thing you can do in a world of financial uncertainty is understand how money works, make smart decisions, and start building something that lasts. That's exactly what this channel is here to help you do. Now that you understand how the national debt affects your wallet, the next question most people ask is this: what actually happens when a government can't pay its debts? And what does that mean for your money? That's exactly what we cover next.